there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Jordan and this is Common Thread. Today I'm going to be answering the question, what is ethical fashion? So if you know me personally, you know that ethical fashion is something that I'm really passionate about. About 2 years ago, I decided to start making the switch from primarily like fast fashion brands to ethical clothing. So for the first year, I only bought a few unethically made pieces, and in the last year I'm really happy to say that I have spent $0 on unethical fashion for myself. Now, that being said, I have bought a couple of things for my kids, but for myself at this point I have been totally fast fashion free for a full year now. So there are so many reasons why ethical fashion is important to me, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. But when I'm talking to friends and family, I don't get a lot of specific questions about ethical fashion. The question that I usually get is just, well, what is ethical fashion? What counts as ethical fashion? And this is a pretty fair question, because ethical fashion, while it's not actually a new thing, it's only recently sort of come into the mainstream as a term that we use in our everyday life. And another thing is that ethical is such an ambiguous term in that each person that you talk to is going to have a slightly different definition of what ethical means. But I'm going to do my very best to break down the definition of ethical fashion, so hopefully by the end of this video you are going to have a better understanding of ethical fashion and whether or not it's something that you feel like you need to start bringing into your life as well. Now, just to be thorough, I'm just going to read you the definition of what ethical means. Again, because people are going to all have slightly different definitions of it, but if we're looking at Webster's, this is what it says. It says, ethical is involving or expressing moral approval or disapproval and conforming to accepted standards of conduct. So again, it's pretty ambiguous. What it really comes down to for me personally is that does it check the boxes of is it kind and is it fair? And I feel like this is true in basically all kinds of ethical questions. Is it kind and is it fair? And I will come back to this in just a minute, but first, ethical fashion is an umbrella term, so it encompasses both an ideology but also an industry, which makes it kind of complicated. Ethical fashion is not a legally binding term, which means that companies can use it even if they're not ethical. Most of us are becoming more aware about how our food and our cosmetic companies often use greenwashing by using terms like natural or healthy when they're anything but natural or healthy, but those aren't legally binding terms either. So just like food and cosmetics, the fashion industry will use terms like, and I have a list here, ethical, green, organic, eco, sustainable, and even terms like slow fashion are becoming more and more popular. And they do that just to sell items regardless of the ethicalness of their products. So that is just something to be aware of when you're shopping ethically, is to know the background on the products that you're purchasing. Just like you would with your food or your cosmetics, it's just good to do your research and know what you're getting into. And if you're curious more about greenwashing, if that's maybe not a term that you've heard before, I will link a video below by, I think it's My Green Closet, who did a video on greenwashing, and it's really very helpful and very informative. All of her videos are usually really well researched and very informative, so I will link that down below. All right, now back to our question, what is ethical fashion? Most ethical fashion brands, I don't want to say all, because I feel like I'm going to say all and somebody's going to put their hand up with something that I've missed. So most ethical fashion brands are going to be able to tick yes to one or more of these questions. Is it good for people? Is it good for the environment? And is it good for animals? Now, not every ethical brand is going to be able to say yes to all of these, but certainly it should be able to say yes to at least one of these. And I'll break these down a little bit more. Is it good for people? Are the people who are producing the clothes doing so in a healthy, safe environment where none of their human rights are being ignored? Are they making a living wage? Are they working reasonable hours? Are they underaged? And if you're not really sure about what counts as underaged or what counts as child labor, I will link a World Vision webpage that really clearly defines what child labor is in case you're unsure. Is it safe? Is the building safe? Are the people being provided with the things that they need to do their job in a safe way, like gloves or masks? Is it safe in that there's a fan running when it's very hot or there's heat when it's very cold? Is it a safe environment? So basically it comes down to, is the product that is being produced, is it being produced in a way that is kind to the people who are doing it and that is fair to the people who are doing it? Next is it good for the environment, or at least not bad for the environment? Right now, the textile industry is the second runner-up for the worst polluter, right after the oil and gas industry, which seems insane to me that there is that much textile waste being created. Textiles create a huge amount of water to produce them, right from the growing of the cotton or the flax or the trees. A lot of people have heard about the study that Levi's did where they followed a pair of their jeans, I think it was the 501 jeans, right from being produced to their disposal and the impact that one pair of jeans can have. And in total, the water used, also this included the washing later on in the wearing life of this pair of jeans, was 3,781 liters of water. This is crazy. So they are developing more water efficient ways of producing denim. Not all companies obviously are doing that, but there are companies that are trying to create less waste just in the production of their denim because it is a water heavy material to produce. And I'll link that down below. Yeah, I think it's called, oh, it's the life cycle of a jean? Something like that. Anyway, I'll link it down below. You can go and check that out. It is very interesting. I found it very interesting. So every piece of clothing that is being produced requires something from the environment. Companies that are working really hard to make sure that those requirements are as low as possible are companies that we would consider ethical clothing companies. How do they dispose of the water after they've used it for dyeing their garments? Are they using recycled materials? And this is, again, kind of tricky because we get into microplastics when you're using recycled bottles to make fleeces, which is something that happens quite often. Even just producing higher quality products, which means that they are going to be used and loved and worn a lot and then mended, and that they're going to be kept out of the landfill for just that much longer. So all of these are things that different companies are doing to help with the environmental impact of the textile industry. And so these are what we would consider ethical clothing brands or sustainable clothing brands. And basically for this, again, coming back to that kind or fair, is this being kind to the environment? Is it being fair to the environment? Is it asking too much of the environment or not giving back enough to the environment? There's all sorts of clothing brands that are popping up that are doing really unique, cool things to sort of neutralize their environmental impact. And I think that will just continue to rise as people become more aware of how detrimental the textile industry is to our environment. So the last one is probably the most controversial, and I think that's just because we all sort of have maybe different perspectives on what would be considered ethical in terms of the treatment of animals. Most of us can agree that animals should be treated with kindness and with respect, and that they shouldn't suffer needlessly. So a lot of companies are coming out and being cruelty-free is sort of the term used when we're talking about a company that purposefully doesn't cause animals to suffer in the production of their products. So again, it comes back to that, is it kind? Is it fair? Are we being kind to the animal? Are we being fair to the animal? Whether or not you're totally vegan and you will never wear leather, you'll never wear wool, you'll never wear silk, or if you feel that a happy sheep growing up on a farm who gets sheared, that wool is okay or acceptable for you. So that's the third way that a company can be considered ethical if someone's talking about ethical clothing. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I do personally think that this is considered ethical fashion because I think it checks yes to all three of these boxes. I touched on it before, and that is thrifting and secondhand clothing and vintage clothing, that by purchasing it, giving it a second life, you are keeping it out of the landfill. And that is a huge part of how textiles have become so unethical, is that it is the people at the beginning of the chain and the people at the end of the chain that are suffering the most. So it is the people who are producing the clothes, but it's also the people who are having to dispose of the clothes at the end. So I worked in Kenya for a while, and there it was very usual to see like piles and piles of garments that were just lit on fire, or they would be dug into the ground and burned under the ground. And later on I learned that that is because North America sends a humongous amount of textiles to Kenya and other parts of Eastern Africa for them to be disposed of. So for me, because thrifting is both ethical, very sustainable, but it's also really easy on the wallet, that is primarily the kind of shopping that I do. So like this hat is actually an old cowboy hat that I got and reshaped with steam to kind of do like a free people, is that what it is? Oh no, lack of color, to do like a lack of color dupe hat, because I could not spend that much and they're not ethical anyway. And then this top is, I believe it's just Forever 21, which are now closed down. Woohoo! This necklace is by an ethical fashion brand called Just One. I will link them down below. They're really cool because you actually, when you purchase your product, it has who made it with a little picture and a little bio about the person who made it. And this one I found at a store locally, and it was made by a woman in a slum that I had been to when I was in Kenya. So it just had a really special meaning to me. So I would love if anybody has any comments or anything that you'd like to add to this, to just put it in the comments below, and I would love to have a discussion about this. What is ethical fashion to you? Is it something that you feel strongly about or not? So I look forward to talking to you guys about that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up or subscribe down below if you want to see more videos like this. Thanks, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!